Okay, I hope you're ready to learn some science from a non-scientist, because that's what's going to happen today. This is going to be fun. Kia ora everyone, this is Heyjohanna. Welcome to episode 2 of my colour theory videos. Today we will be learning about additive colour, how we see colour, and why all this is important to know in regards to art. I'm going to be doing this on my iPad today, as that makes the most sense for additive colour. Just to be clear, I have studied this extensively, so while I am no scientist, I feel I have a firm understanding of light and colour. If you're an artist and you want to strengthen your understanding of colour theory, or if you're just genuinely curious, then this video is for you. As someone who used to be depressingly bad at all kinds of science, I figure I can help teach others who have tried to learn but simply don't understand. So, without any further ado, let's get into Colour Theory episode 2. Okay, so additive colour is colour created by mixing light. This system is used by computer screens, televisions, phones, iPads, basically any screen to display the full range of colours. This is important to understand as an artist because if you create a digital drawing, that means you're working with a completely different system of colour mixing to that which is used with traditional painting. If you were to try and print, say, this digital drawing, the colours might look different. They might look duller, you may not have as many in-between tones, and this is because your printer is mixing ink to get different colours while your computer is using light. Those two systems are fundamentally different and they don't always overlap properly. If we zoom in on the main here, you can see when we get really close up all of the individual pixels. Even in this tiny section of the painting here, there's probably hundreds of different shades and hues of this purple, and your printer isn't quite as good at getting every single one of those, so it may end up looking a little bit different, and that's just something which is really important to understand if you're going to be transitioning from digital to print or vice versa. Okay, so let's begin by having a look at the primary colours of light, as well as the additive colour wheel. Now, if you haven't already seen my first colour theory video, I would recommend going and watching that before you watch this one, as I will be referencing a couple of things that we learned previously from that. I'll leave a link to that up in the corner and in the description box down below. So when we're mixing light, we need to start with no light at all, or in other words, black. So imagine this like I am shining a spotlight of coloured light onto a black wall. The primary colours of light are red, green, and blue. If you mix blue light and red light, you get magenta light. If you mix green light and blue light, you get cyan. If you mix green light and red light, you get yellow. And if you mix all three of these colours together, you get white light, as you can see in the centre here. So there you have it, the primaries of light, red, green and blue, RGB, the secondaries of light, yellow, cyan and magenta, and all three mixed together make white light. Let me draw this into a proper colour wheel like I did in the previous video so you can see fully what's going on here when you mix all of the colours. So again, we start with black, or the absence of light. We add our primaries, red, green and blue. Then we add our secondary colours, magenta in between red and blue, yellow in between red and green, and cyan in between green and blue. Now the only thing left to do is make our tertiary colours, which are in between each of these primaries and secondaries. So we're going to mix red and yellow, yellow and green, green and cyan, cyan and blue, blue and magenta, and finally magenta and red. Okay, and finally we'll add in our triangle in the middle to fully display our primary colours. So there you have it, this is kind of our additive colour wheel, and you can see that these three primaries make up all of these beautiful hues around the outside. These transitionary colours are all made up of a primary and a secondary mixed together. We've got our primaries in the middle, red, green and blue, and I'll just label all of these colours so that you have a clear indication of what each of them kind of is. So up the top we've got red, green, blue. For our secondaries we've got yellow, magenta, cyan, and then our tertiaries we have orange, lime green or yellowy green, turquoise, azure, violet and rose. So here we have our additive colour wheel. Although additive colour is more commonly displayed like this, you can of course make up a colour wheel so you can see all the transitionary colours and everything, and that would be absolutely fine. As long as you learn that red, green and blue mixed together make white light, that's valuable information to have. Now it's easy for me to sit here and say additive colour is mixing light, and you could take my word for it and be on your way, but I believe it is important to delve deeper and to understand what is actually happening when we see light and colour. So now we're going to get into the actual science of what colour is and how your eyes work. But don't worry, it is really fun and it is really interesting. Okay, visible light, or in other words colour, is just a tiny part of a spectrum that we call the electromagnetic spectrum. Light is actually a wave, and different colours have different wavelengths, and that's how we're able to distinguish blue from red, orange from green, and so on. The part of the spectrum, this tiny little part here that we can see, is called the visible spectrum. This ranges from tight, high energy waves in the violet end to lower energy waves in the red end. If we go above violet, we have ultraviolet rays, X-rays and gamma rays, and if we go below red, we have infrared rays, microwaves and radio waves. So let's go back to our colour wheel from earlier. We can see here on this diagram that if you mix red, green and blue, which are the primaries of light, together, you end up with white light. Now this is because white light is actually a complete mixture of all the colours in the visible spectrum in equal parts. The sun is the most common source of white light that we experience, but some light bulbs and torches also produce white light. When you're looking at a white light, let's say from the sun or from a white light bulb, what you are actually seeing is an even distribution of all of the colours in the visible spectrum. This actually helps explain why when white light is shone through a prism, it creates a little rainbow, but I won't go into that right now, that's just a whole other thing. Okay, let's imagine for a moment that you're standing outside on a nice day and you see a sunflower and you're like, oh my, that sunflower is really yellow. What's actually happening is white light from our sun is coming down, it's hitting that flower, and only yellow light is reflected back into your eye. All other colours of light are being absorbed by that flower. And this goes for pretty much everything that you see. A red ball, white light is coming down, hitting that ball, and red light is being reflected into your eye while all other light is absorbed. Same with a blue shirt, green grass, a purple shoe, you get the idea. I've drawn this as a rainbow because, as I've already explained, white light is an even distribution of all of the colours in the visible spectrum. Let's think about our sunflower again and break down what is actually going on in our eyes. So we know white light is hitting the flower. We know that all the colours of light except for yellow are being absorbed, and we know that yellow light is being reflected into our eye. But why are we seeing yellow? How is a wave visible to us? Well, that's what I'll be explaining next. I think I'm just going to put this on a brown background because I'm getting a bit glary with the yellow colour on the white background. That's a bit better. So when the yellow light waves enter your eye, they are detected by light-sensitive cells that you have in the back of your eye called rods and cones. The area of the eye where the rods and cones are kept is called the retina. You have one type of rod cell that detects light levels and takes over in low light situations, but they are not colour sensitive, and that's why it's more difficult to see colour in low light, but let's just ignore rods for now. You have three types of light sensitive cone cells that respond to red light, green light, and blue light. So imagine all these tiny little cells which are sensitive to red light, green light and blue light in the back of your eye in an area called the retina. As I explained earlier with our colour wheel, red, green and blue light are the primary colours of light, the same as our eyes. That makes sense, right? The primaries are based off of what we as humans can physically see. We have red sensitive cells, green sensitive cells and blue sensitive cells so that we can detect red, green and blue light, and as I've already explained, if we mix these three together we can get every colour in the visible spectrum. Consider yellow for a moment. It exists as its own wavelength, but we do not have a cone cell sensitive to yellow light, so why can we see it? What happens when you're looking at the sunflower is the yellow light is hitting the back of your eye, the retina, and this is activating some of your red cones and some of your green cones. This signal is then sent to your brain and it goes, I'm getting both red and green signals, it must be somewhere in between. Let's go back to our spectrum. So we can see here, if our red cones were firing and our green cones were firing and our brain's thinking, it must be something in between that. Well, in between that is yellow. So your brain concludes that the colour that you're seeing is yellow. The same thing happens for pretty much all of the colours in the visible spectrum. If white light was to come down and hit something purple, then these purple waves would be reflected back into your eye, all of your blue cones would be fired and some of your red cones would fire, and your brain automatically goes, what's something which is mostly blue and a little bit red? It's purple. Same with orange. If some white light was to come down, orange light would be reflected back into your eye and it would fully activate your red cones and only partially activate your green cones. And then this signal is sent to your brain and your brain goes, what's mostly red with a tiny bit of green? It must be orange. Your brain is simply amazing. Humans have absolutely millions of these cones in our retina, and that's why we're able to see such a vast range of colours. We're able to distinguish so many different wavelengths of light. It's estimated that humans can see about 7 million colours. Let's come back to our sunflower diagram just for a second. Considering that we know that when we see yellow light, it's our red and green cones that are firing, we've figured out that you can trick your brain into thinking it's seeing yellow by shining a combination of red and green light into your eye, making your red sensitive cones and your green sensitive cones activate. Your brain will receive that information and think, I'm getting signals from red and green, that's what yellow things do, it must be yellow. And that is how screens actually work to display all these colours. As you may or may not know, your screen is made up of a whole lot of pixels, and behind every single pixel are 3 tiny lights. 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 green. All your screen has to do to show you yellow is send a little bit of red light and a little bit of green light, and as long as the pixels are small enough that you can't distinguish between the red and the green, your brain will receive signals that your red cones are firing and your green cones are firing, and it will conclude that you're seeing yellow. By lighting up different combinations of red, green and blue light at different intensities, the screen can display an enormous range of colours. As these 3 lights, like we talked about earlier, can be combined to create every colour that you can see. So the only limitation that your screen has is how accurate those tiny little lights behind each pixel are, and computers are pretty accurate. Why am I telling you all of this? Why do you need to know the science? Because it is so important as an artist to understand how screens work to display colour. It is so important to understand that RGB has a much larger gamut, or in other words, range of colours that can be made than CMYK. This means that printing your digital art may result in art looking different, less vibrant, less colourful, whatever. It is so important to have a good grasp of what colour really is and why you can see it at all. And finally, I'm telling you all this because it's actually fun to learn the science behind colour. It's interesting to begin to comprehend something that you've taken for granted since the moment that you came into this world. I absolutely guarantee that understanding this, having a good grasp of colour theory as a whole, will improve your understanding of the world and will improve your art by extension. Alright, it's time for a quick time lapse of this episode's drawing before we wrap this all up. So here's the sketch that I'm going to be colouring today, and after I've finished I'm going to print it out and show you just how different the 2 pieces look side by side. So let's get into it. Oh my god, okay, this drawing, it's really not an imaginative or creative piece. The reason I did it was to show you the difference between digital art on a computer and digital art once it's printed. I think going in I had this feeling that the only reason I was doing this piece was for demonstration purposes, so I didn't try very hard, and it's just so slack. Everything about it. You'll see what I mean in a bit, but I'm pretty disappointed with how it came out. Though not at all shocked, seeing as I went into this not caring at all. I was simultaneously trying to get the drawing done quickly and think about elements that the printer would find difficult to replicate, and that resulted in what I consider to be an unworthy addition to my art wall. But that has almost nothing to do with the actual technical elements of the piece and more to do with my attitude while drawing it. Anyway, I was also slightly struggling because it had been months, literally months, since I last did any kind of digital drawing, and it was so not a medium I was comfortable with. It took me a significant amount of warm-up time to get back into it, and even then I felt kind of clumsy and basically airbrushed my way into an acceptable drawing. What you're not seeing in this time lapse is the amount of times I redid the eyes, the eyelashes, the lips, basically just everything. This piece took so long, but that time is just not reflected in the art at all because it was all spent redoing over and over again. Very, very frustrating, and this was not made any easier with the knowledge that the whole reason I was doing a digital drawing in the first place was simply to prove a point that may not even work. Anyway, I knew the part the printer would struggle with the most was the neon triangle light thing. Some very nice, very expensive printers can do gradients to 0% opacity all right, but most home printers can't get a seamless transition. So I would recommend, if you are going to print your art, avoid gradients to 0% opacity. That is to say, avoid making a colour fade out completely, as it's likely your printer will not handle it very well. So here are my two drawings side by side. We've got the printed copy on good quality card and the digital copy. Now this might be a little hard to see on camera, but I immediately see a difference in colour. The printed copy is duller, there's less tonal variety, and some of the colours are fundamentally different. The skin tone on the printed version is more yellow, and the pink in this light triangle is more orangey. I should mention that this can be fixed somewhat, but it is a lot of effort. You have to calibrate your printer settings and your screen settings to match, and then even then it won't be perfect. While this printed version is still okay, you can definitely see that it's just a slightly disappointing version of my digital one over here. It's a very subtle difference, so you may not even be able to see it on camera, especially with the light going crazy in the corner over here, but they are different. Of course they are. This is on a screen and this is on physical paper. Anyway, I think this video has gone on long enough. In conclusion, this shit is fun and interesting and will help you be a better artist. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for my next colour theory video, in which I will talk about the relationship between subtractive and additive colour and explain why they are called that. I don't know when that's going to come out though. Kia ora everyone, have a wonderful evening, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!